So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay. This time we're going to be on the North Downs to witness a 1v1. This one was sent to me very recently actually by Kuroguro-chan, and he is going to be playing as the Witch Realm of Angmar, and he is going to be facing off against Starling, who is playing as the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm. And there will be a little cut at the start of this battle when we do finally get to it, because, well, they've deployed literally on opposite sides and opposite corners, so obviously they're going to need some time to manoeuvre, and it is 21,000 frames actually, so it's going to be another elongated fight, which you don't often expect with Angmar, I must say, considering how aggressive they usually are, but we'll see. I mean, we'll have a look at Kuro's army first of all, and it's good actually because we can see the Snaga before they pop up out of nowhere, because of course we can see the hidden units from the green team at all times. And yeah, I mean, well, the Snaga Stalkers are, they're not as bad as people might think they are, considering their reputation, but still, they're not likely to make much of a dent on many of the Dwarven infantry units, but still, they are just there for numbers and to be a meat shield. We've got some Snaga archers at the front, which are obviously very cheap. They can hide as well, which is always good. And honestly, this is going to be pretty cost effective if the Dwarves have invested heavily in their own archers, because the Snaga archers can be sent forward as a sort of sacrificial pawn, and you know, Angmar isn't going to care too much whether they lose their archers or not, because certainly their true strength lies elsewhere. Just in front here we can see that he's got a unit of Barrow Wights. I think this is just a single unit, just stretched out really thinly as we go through the trees. Their hiding animation looks very strange, but obviously the Barrow Wights are very well known for being very good in melee at just not dying. They don't necessarily get a ton of kills, although that does tend to rack up over the amount of time they're alive, but because they've got several HP, they can do really well for themselves. But their melee stats are not great, it's worth mentioning, so they are at their best when you support them with a unit which can do some damage pretty quickly. And he's got another unit of Barrow Wights, incidentally, just in behind his Snaga archers. And then he's got some Angmar halberds, like a full line of Angmar halberds, which is unsurprising considering he's going up against the Dwarves. AP polearms, of course, are going to serve you quite well in this sort of situation. They're still probably going to get dumpstered by quite a lot of the Dwarven infantry if they're unsupported, but even so, considering how cheap they are, they make up the ideal bulk of your infantry when you're playing as a faction like the Orcs. And then we've got some Blackwatch Legion over here, good for pushing through the lines. Obviously the Dwarves do have pretty good mass, but they're going to be no match for the Blackwatch Legion when they start pushing. They really are the bulldozers of Third Age Reforged in many ways, with how they can nudge people out of the way. And also, of course, pretty well armoured, very well shielded, I should say, so ranged fire is not likely to have an effect on them as they advance, but their melee attack stats are not super high, so they will need to be supported, otherwise the Dwarves will start to cut them down. So just to go over those units in the middle there, we can see that he's also got some Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, which are dual-wielding units very much focused around attack. Obviously, you know, bad against missile fire, they always have been. A little bit of a this unit's been in a bit of a strange place of late in the latest patches. I mean, they're still damaging, but they're not quite as good as they used to be. We'll see how well they can do here, though, because they are still very capable of getting a lot of kills. Over here we can see the Witchers. Now, the last time we saw the Witchers, it was on Dunharrow, and they essentially won the match for the attackers with how much damage they did. On an open field like this, it might be more difficult, but if the Dwarves haven't brought much ranged power, then the Witchers should be able to manoeuvre around the battlefield at will, and if they get into the right position, they could completely destroy the Dwarven army. So Starling is going to have to be on the lookout for the Witchers. The presence of the Witchers is one reason why you're always going to want at least one unit of archers, really. And in the middle we've got some Trolls of Gunvad, the more attack-focused trolls. Probably not too surprising, you know, going for that extra damage against the strong Dwarven units. Some Witch Realm Hammer Guard as well, again, AP, very, very damaging. Obviously not quite as durable and long-lasting as the Witch Realm Blackguard. Another unit of Scourge Raiders over here, and then at the back we've got a couple more units of Angmar halberds to sort of round off the army, and I believe then the General is going to be back here. We can see that the Witch King is here, but the General's model is back here in the Witch Realm Inquisitors, which again is a good move because Khazad-dûm can bring melee cav of their own, but nowhere near the same level as the Witch Realm Inquisitors. So let's pop over to the other side of the field to see what Starling has brought. And indeed he has got, looks like 3 units of Orc Hunters, so that definitely means that the Archer fight is going to be well within his favour. Indeed, the Snaga Archers might not last long enough to drain their ammunition reserves too much. They're going to be the most important thing to try and deal with the Witchers. Obviously, as has been said before about these guys, not really the same philosophy when it comes to survivability as the rest of the Khazad-dûm army. They can be skirmished down from a distance. They don't have the highest armor values compared to their peers, but they do have good damage. You know, it's more akin to some of the Elven archers, really, in the way that they work, in the way that they focus on certain things. Meanwhile over here we've got some 4th Legion Shield Guard backed up by some sentries, so a Dwarven Phalanx. This is obviously something which is seen quite a lot. Spears that provide the mass, and then pikes which provide the solidity to the line to make sure they can't go through it. And the 4th Legion are also pretty damn good anyway. They can sort of mix it with most heavy infantry regardless. That's the good thing about being Khazad-dûm, is you don't have to rely on line infantry to be able to kill things. Your spearmen will do that job as well. Very thick front line indeed. We'll see how well that does against the Khazad-dûm, the Angmar onslaught. Then he's got a couple of units of Khazad-dûm reclaimers, of course, the axe throwers, damaging, close range. If things get into a blob fight again, it's a similar story with these guys as it is with the Witchers, only the Khazad-dûm reclaimers are a little bit more user-friendly. If they can get into a position where they can go around and start hitting the Khazad-dûm army from the sides, it's going to be very, very good for them. And obviously they can also ward off the Witch Realm Inquisitors from getting nice charges off. Got a single unit of Warriors of Khazad-dûm over here, interestingly enough. Yes, I think this is the General's Bodyguard unit. You can see Balin here at the back. So the Warriors of Khazad-dûm is going to be the General's unit, obviously saving a little bit of money where the General is and deciding to put his money elsewhere. And then he's got some Mercenary Crossbowmen. 2 units of Mercenary Crossbowmen. Interesting. As well as some Mercenary Cavalry on the other side. So he's actually got 4 units of Cavalry. That's interesting. No, nothing really in the way of really elite infantry. We'll see. I feel as though the main disadvantage of this army could be being outmaneuvered. This Phalanx is very strong from the front, but as soon as Angmar starts going around the sides, we'll see. But obviously there will be a little cut while the armies move towards one another. So I think we're about to have the archer engagement start. And now Angmar do technically occupy the high ground, but they can't really take too much advantage of it because Khazad-dûm are a fair amount away from the cliffs. The Orc Hunters will be moving into position over here. And it is going to be, you can see the Snaga moving down that cliff over there, but it is going to be fairly difficult actually for Khazad-dûm to be flanked. Mainly because of the presence of their own cavalry. The Merc crossbows in particular, that's the Merc cavalry, but the Merc crossbows, Angmar are pretty well known for not bringing as many archers as other factions quite a lot of the time. And obviously the main weakness of mercenary crossbowmen is their horrendous weakness to archers and their terrible range. The Snaga archers would still be able to do a lot of damage to them, of course, but if they stay until the late game, the Merc crossbows could be very, very deadly indeed. So we'll see. I mean, certainly the infantry advantage here is going to go into the favour of Angmar. Angmar have got all of the tools necessary to win the infantry fight, but it's all of the peripheral units which will serve Khazad-dûm quite well here. Their archers, their Merc crossbows, and their Khazad-dûm reclaimers, as well as their own cavalry, which is going to make it difficult for Angmar. Angmar can't afford to simply just charge across the field and try and destroy them, as you know a lot of Angmar armies usually try to do, because if they do, they'll just be enveloped by all of the peripheral dwarven units. You'll see though. I do think that the Angmar Halberd should actually do pretty well here. I mean, despite the fact they are going to be outranged by the pikes, the 4th Legion, you know, they're heavily armoured, very reliant on their armour. We'll see how well this goes. So the Khazad-dûm reclaimers there. It's going to be difficult as well for the for Angmar to use their Witch Realm Inquisitors to their fullest effect. They're going to try and smoke the mercenary crossbowmen out from these trees over here. What's going on over here? Witch Realm Scourge Raiders taking a few hits and then retreating. Obviously very weak to archers. There's also Snaga archers over here, as well as Snaga stalkers at the front, and we can now see that the Orc Hunters have opened up, and they are starting to go for, I think, the Halberds. Yes, they are going for the Halberds, which, you know, they will get a lot of kills on the Halberds, to be fair, whereas the Barrow Wights have got sufficient hit points to withstand that barrage for quite some time. Snaga Stalkers just sort of moving menacingly into position, the Angmar Halberds as well. It's going to be, you know, it's because eventually, of course, Khazad-dûm are going to run out of stuff like, well, they're going to run out of their ammunition from the start, which is going to allow Angmar to more easily move forward. It depends on how many kills they can actually get. Barrow Wights, of course, very, very slow. Snaga archers getting up onto this hill. Interesting to see how they survive over here. I mean, they've got the cover of the Witch Realm Inquisitors, but we know that the Merc crossbows are in these trees over here. We also know that the Merc cavalry is now shifting its position over this side of the battlefield, seeing as Angmar seems to be focusing a little bit more around this avenue of attack. Yeah, Merc cavalry. Melee cavalry, usually very cost effective, but obviously Witch Realm Inquisitors are going to be a big no-no for them to try and fight. There are enough of them that they could do some decent damage. Here come the Snaga Stalkers trying to sort of screen. as the Merc Cavalry comes in. Now the charge of Merc Cavalry is obviously not great. It's not armor piercing and it's not particularly high in terms of the statistic. But should still be able to do a decent job here against some of these archers, and they do manage to connect quite nicely. And obviously Snaga have got very little in the way of defences. But the Witch Realm Inquisitors are on their way. And also, interestingly enough, the Orc Hunters are also firing in here, probably getting a decent amount of friendly fire. Now I would suggest that Starling doesn't want to lose his Merc Cavalry so early. I mean, we can also see that the Merc Crossbows are coming in here, which could be a turning point as well. The same goes for Kuro. If he loses his Witch Realm Inquisitors to this fight, then it could go very badly for him. But Merc Cavalry already wavering, obviously. Lower morale on the mercenaries, and one of them actually broke. That's obviously the Witch Realm Inquisitor is certainly a fear-causing unit, but I'm surprised they broke. They will probably come back. There is enough of them to do so. Angmar, meanwhile, just sort of probing in other sections of the battlefield. This is certainly the area which is most crucial at the moment. The Merc Crossbows are being targeted by the Snaga Archers as well. And now the Witch Realm Inquisitors coming back for another bite. The Snaga Stalkers are still alive and fighting in melee, making it a little bit more awkward for these Merc Cavalry to move as freely as they otherwise would. Decent casualties done here. Witch Realm Scourge Raiders moving forward, potentially to try and catch these archers now that they've been trying to target the concentration of Snaga and Witch Realm Inquisitors, but Starling has managed to save his cavalry force to an extent. Has his other cav returned yet? It has, and it's returned right on the other side of the Angmar line. Now I will say that there probably isn't many vulnerable targets in the Angmar infantry, to be fair, because there's a lot of halberds hanging around, and all of the rest of the infantry is, you know, is well equipped enough to survive a charge from melee cavalry. So yeah, the Merc Cavalry really is only going to be an annoyance once the viable targets have been picked off. And to be honest with you, the Snaga were really the only ones of that. You could try charging the Barrow Wights, I suppose, but the fact that they cause fear is probably going to have a detrimental impact on the Merc Cavalry, considering they've already routed once. Now the Angmar Halberds moving forward. Obviously, the obvious choice would be to try and go for the Witchers, but they are, you know, they're going to be very well defended. I imagine they're going to stick near the Trolls for the most part. And Angmar now closing the noose, as the Orc factions often do. You can see that the Orc Hunters are still firing. What are they firing at? Probably the Scourge Raiders, I would imagine. No, they're going after the Witch Realm Inquisitors, and more than that, they've actually killed a couple of them. Impressive, but they're now going to be able to hide behind this this terrain feature over here. Now the Orc Hunters are going to dive back behind the Khazad defensive line. The cavalry retreating further. The Snaga Archers, they do still have ammunition. The Snaga Archers, I think, would probably be best off actually saving their ammo for the mercenary crossbowmen. Because at this point, if you can keep them from your flanks, you're probably sitting pretty. But we can see here that the Dwarven Phalanx is going to be engaged. Starling's probably feeling pretty confident in his Phalanx's ability to hold, and indeed the Khazad Reclaimers are now throwing their axes into the onrushing Angmar Halberds. The Snaga Archers are trying to target down the Khazad Reclaimers, which is not a terrible idea. They're pretty good at melee as well, and they are doing a hefty amount of damage to the Angmar Halberds. But if Kuro was going to lose a unit, I dare say that he would probably choose the Angmar Halberds to throw under the bus if the Snaga Stalkers were not an option. You can see now the envelopment is beginning. We'll see if Khazad have got the numbers of infantry required to hold Angmar at bay from all fronts, while also using their speciality units like the Reclaimers. And obviously they do need to bear in mind as well that the Witches are still somewhere. Where are they? I've lost track of them, which would be a real bad thing in the real game. They do blend in kind of nicely with the Barrow Wights from a distance, so that's something. The Barrow Wights obviously very, very slow. That's a pretty big downside to them. Snaga Archers firing away. All of the Merc Cavalry is still somewhat intact, and these Barrow Wights are really dragging their heels here in the back lines. Witches must be over here then, I would assume. Indeed they are. Now we finally have the melee engagement beginning. Angmar halberds getting in there, lowering their halberds, but they are going to need to support the Barrow-wights to survive for a long period of time. The General's unit, the Warriors of Khazad-dûm, is being engaged here by a unit of Angmar halberds. See how well they can do. Obviously, numbers-wise, the Orcs should be okay for a little while. The Barrow-wights will also fight for a long time, but you can see already, actually, that some Angmar halberds are already routing, which is not good at all. The Angmar halberds are a necessary part of this line. They deal some nice AP damage, and also their numbers. The Barrow-wights alone will eventually fall under sustained pressure. Here come the Blackwatch Legion. They could push through and get to the Orc Hunters, which would, you know, the more chaotic a line gets, often that's the key for the Orcs. They have hit a rather interesting point of the line, however. They're right on the corner, so they're engaging all of these units. They should still be able to push their way through the Warriors of Khazad-dûm, though, and that could see Balin in some real trouble, depending on where his unit model is. The Blackwatch Legion are now in behind the line, and here come the Trolls, so concentration of force here. The Great Shield units pushing through, and then the Trolls have got an easy road into the back lines. We'll see now what the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are worth. And also on this weaker section of the line, the Witch Realm Hammerguard are also going to come in to try and clean up the mess. So I think now actually is a good time to turn the speed down to half. And you can see over here the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders are going to engage this unit of Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, which came out to the flank. The Snaga Archers are still firing away. The Witch Realm Inquisitors are still back there. Now the real question is, where are the Witches? The Witches surely being ready for some sort of nefarious purpose. These Barrow-wights also slowly but surely marching forward. They're starting to rout down this end though, so Khazad-dûm should have victory down there, because obviously Angmar only sent a token force down there to really occupy them. It is up here, where all of Angmar's elites are, that the damage is really being done. Charm Scourge Raiders over there, we can see that the Scourge Raiders doing pretty well for themselves, although over here they're only up against Orc Hunters, so they should be able to win that against the Skirmisher. And now, they only had one infantry unit over here, the Warriors of Khazad-dûm, and that was never going to be enough against the onslaught. As I was kind of fearing, the Phalanx has held up very, very well from the front, but that could only cover one angle of attack, and the Orcs are always going to try to go around defences with their sheer numbers. Now you can see that Khazad-dûm are going to try and peel off some units from down here. Sentries of Khazad-dûm to try and salvage this situation. These Khazad-dûm Reclaimers in melee doing okay for themselves, but the Trolls are still preventing them from firing, which is the important thing. A shower of Snaga arrows going into the Merc Cav. You can see the Mercenary Cavalry down there is also peeling off. And here come the Witchers. Now the Witchers, if they were to get a good hit right along the Phalanx, that would probably be game, set and match, but there's still a long way to go in this fight, to be fair, so now we may as well here go the Witchers, and here they go, and they are hitting that sweet spot there. Tons of dwarves falling away. You can also see over in the background there Mercenary Cavalry diving into the Barrow-wights. Yeah, that was some nice hits there. Another very nice hit indeed. The dwarves just getting grilled. That is causing his own units to rout as well, though. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, perhaps. If you sort of look around the battlefield, are the Witches still firing? They're just sort of holding their ground for the moment. Barrow-wights moving forward. The Merc Cavalry trying to recharge, but obviously they're not Lancers, so the amount of damage they can do is very limited. Having said that, the dwarves still do have a good presence on the field. Despite the recent beating they've taken, they have managed to mitigate some of this damage somewhat. These mercenary crossbows in the back lines, they are shaken. These Khazad-dûm Reclaimers slowly but surely losing to these Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, simply outnumbered. And here you can see the Orc Hunters fighting off against the Witch Realm Hammerguard, so the Hammerguard will obviously be able to be a skirmisher in melee. Over here the Orc Hunters, as we can see the fiery beams of death going into yet more of the Dwarven ranks. I think the problem the Dwarves are going to have here is they may very well be able to weather this storm, even from the Witches, but ultimately there's still enough Barrow-wights left where I don't think they're going to have the punch to deal with the Barrow-wights. They're just going to be too difficult to get rid of. That would be my concern if I were the dwarves at the moment. Not least, of course, that your lines are also in chaos, and that certainly favours Angmar. The Merc Cavalry charging in, but again, there's halberds in here, and the Barrow Wights won't go down unless it's a very devastating charge. And obviously the Merc Cavalry is not really capable of delivering that. The Witcher's now reloading, getting into another nice position here to try and hit another clump of dwarves further down the line, I would assume. Kuro's made really good use of his Witchers here. He's targeted the thickest sections of the dwarven line. Oh, hello. Nice hit there on the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers. The Witchers are so devastating when they get up to their full potential. The Witch Realm Inquisitors are now in the back lines as well. They don't actually have the biggest charge bonus either, but they do cause fear, which means a rear charge can send units routing more easily. Although the dwarves in general have got good enough morale that they will hold themselves together better than the orcs, but we'll see. Good concentration of orc hunters over here. Oh, there goes another section of the dwarven line being grilled. Over here, actually, the dwarves are winning. The combination of 4th Legion and sentries slowly but surely wrapping up this line. But the Barrow Wights, I fear, are just going to hold all of these units in place for too long. I mean, these 4th Legion over here trying to get into it now, but all they really achieve is getting themselves grilled. Another hit from the Witchers, although that one actually only hit 2 unit models. That's probably been the most impotent shot so far. The Snaga Archers being committed forward into melee. Everything just being committed forward at this point from both factions. They can't really afford to leave anything on the line. Merc Crossbowmen still got some ammunition by the looks of things, and we're shooting into the side of this army over here. How much ammo do they actually have though? Another hit from the Witchers, more of the pikes going down. And that's enough to break a unit of sentries, a unit of 98. Those are units which, at this point, the dwarves can scarcely afford to lose. Ooh. The dwarves have been able to stand up to the devastating hits from the Witchers for some time, but I think this might be the beginning of the end for them, unless these units come back, which is a distinct possibility. I mean, there's a lot of them still alive. But this will obviously allow Angmar to focus their resources on other sections of the field. These Merc Crossbows are just going to be chased off by Scourge Raiders and Halberdiers. How much ammunition do the Witchers even have left? There's only 5 Witchers still alive, so they have been targeted by the Merc Crossbows. The Barrow Wights are slowly but surely going to lose this fight. As I said, if they're unsupported, their meagre attack values mean that they can't kill off entire sections of an army by themselves. And the 4th Legion are no joke. There are a few spearmen units which sort of get over the malice like they do. And indeed the dwarves are coming back. And the dwarves may very well be able to outlast this. I mean, if we have a look, Angmar are behind as it stands. Angmar do still have some elite units, however, like the Witch Realm Hammerguard, which, you know, it looks as though they are going to be going after weaker sections of the line. Still got the Witch Realm Inquisitors as well, but there's so many dwarven pikes around that utilising the cavalry might prove to be a little bit more difficult. 4th Legion Shield Guard in the background routing over there. Merc Crossbows which are wavering, trying to charge in. You know it's all hands on deck when the mercenary crossbows are being used as shot cavalry. Here you can see the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. The pikes are down though, and they will be able to get into formation and keep them at bay, you would think. Sentries are routing. I think he's just trying to kill enough of them so that those sentries don't come back, which the dwarven units returning from routing here may be what sees them over the line. Although now we can see that the 4th Legion is starting to break, which, you know it's a dire situation when the 4th Legion is starting to break. And indeed, while the dwarven units are systematically coming back from routing, there goes the Angmar general though, and that could be a big deal actually. Angmar are much more likely to be rocked by the loss of a general. But it could be that all of this routing is what does the dwarves in the end. We'll see. Those Merc Crossbows have still got ammunition actually. That could yet prove to be a very key factor as these Witch Realm Inquisitors charge in to try and prevent them from firing, and they're going to make it as well. But when they don't... Well, they do actually get a volley off, even though the Inquisitors are right in their face. Only 2 Witch Realm Inquisitors left alive as well. The Merc Crossbows are now going to try and run. Indeed, those crossbows could be exactly what the Doctor ordered. Angmar Halberds routing through the fight, which actually might make them start fighting to the death, which doesn't really make them too... Well, actually we can see routing now. Snaga archers which are wavering. Returning dwarven units as well. The Witchram Hammer Guard being defeated. They've been in melee for a long time, their hit points are surely gone. And they're having to fight pikes from the front, which means they're being able to be kept at arm's length. I'm not sure if Angmar has the necessary tools to deal with this. Their units are starting to rout off now as well. The Barrow Wights will probably stay for a long time. But the Barrow Wights are also certainly not going to be enough to kill off all of these dwarven units. Unless Angmar gets some returning units as well, this could be it. The Merc crossbows being used again as shock cavalry. Trying to do some additional damage to these Barrow Wights. Will those units return? Even if those units return, I think the dwarves may very well. Here you can see the Witchram Hammer Guard actually disengaging from the pikes, which, you know, probably a good idea a long time ago. The 4th Legion were definitely where they were needed most, and the being bogged down in the pikes for so long hurt them. And it left their allies without a genuine damage dealer to cut their way through all of these 4th Legion units. Mercenary crossbows coming back for another charge. Still a half-decent amount of time to go in this fight though, so it's not as if Angmar are on the verge of collapse, even though it might look like it. Here comes a charge from the Merc crossbows. Trying to finish them off. This might be enough, honestly. They're winded. They're taking... Yeah, they're wavering. This should be the end of them. And if they were to rout, they would certainly not come back. They're just being kept in melee, actually. All hands on deck. They do rout. So then, we come down to the final fight. And I think the dwarves should probably manage this. The Barrow Wights have been in melee for a long time. Most of their hit points have already been shaved off at this point. There are only 75 of them left. Not only that, but the pikes are still going to pose a problem. Even though the Witchram Hammer Guard disengaged from them, there's only 8 of them now. The pikes were still able to simply move back up and re-engage, so... I don't know, I don't think there's anything else on the field which is going to be too much of a factor. All of the Angmar units I think have routed for good, so I think we are now... Yeah, I would agree. I think the dwarves have managed to withstand the devastating hits from the witches. Let's have a look here, yeah. 8% behind. What can Kuro do? Can any magic be done? This has shown the resilience actually of the Barrow Wights, because they've been fighting for a long time and they're still going. The Hammer Guard are trying to hide behind the Barrow Wights and pick off units where they can. Actually, these 4th Legion, they're wavering. They push through the Barrow Wights and... Now that could cost them. And they're only shaken. Yeah, I think that is Angmar's only real option at this point, is to hope for some sort of rout. Which is possible. I mean, the 4th Legion are... They've got good morale, and you know the dwarves in general have got decent morale. It's not up to the same level of the elves, but you know they are up against 2 units which cause fear. A lot of Angmar's higher tier units cause fear, but I don't see it happening myself. I think there's enough dwarves here to sort of support one another to make it so that they don't rout. Victory is almost a certainty. Defeat seems certain for Angmar. It's now a 10% gap. Very hotly contested though. In the middle section of that fight, when the witches were doing their thing, when Angmar pushed through that sort of section of line that was weak enough to push through with the Blackwatch Legion and then with the trolls, I'm sure most people were thinking, here we go again. Looks like the orcs are going to steamroll over a faction, but not to be. Khazad-dûm, more than most, are very well equipped to deal with an infantry slog, and even with inferior numbers in terms of pure melee units, they were still able to pull this out. And it is going to be a slow but sure path to the end here, as we'll go up to 2 times speed at this point. Obviously it's spears with them, spears and pikes, which traditionally do their killing a little bit more slowly against the Barrow Wights, which are probably the best example of a melee tar pit in the game as it stands. continuous amount of poking going on. Both of these engagements are getting further and further away from one another. Although this might be bad for the dwarves, because these 4th Legion could rout in the face of these fear-causing units, and indeed I think these sentries kind of realise that. They're going to go over and help them. Still wavering. They're flicking backwards and forwards between wavering, shaken and steady, all of these units. I think they should be fine though. I don't think... I mean, even if they do, I think there's enough units over here to probably see them through. Pikes trying to get into a position where they can get their pikes down into formation more efficiently. Kuro managed to pull back another percentage point. That's something. But ultimately, there's only going to be one outcome in this fight, I think. And these sentries of Khazad-dûm proved to be a big factor there. Yeah, it just goes to show the resilience of Khazad-dûm. Obviously, we saw them lose in the last 1v1 to Mirkwood on Pelennor. But this time around, against a Angmar, one of the, or perhaps even the most aggressive focused army, with all of their infantry, with all of the tools that Angmar has at their disposal, the dwarves were still able to weather that storm. And with a more cavalry-focused approach as well, which I don't think most people would consider. I don't think most people would consider bringing 4 cavalry units as Khazad-dûm. But if you're going to bring the Merc crossbows, this is probably one of the better matchups you can do it in. As these Barret Whites slowly but surely bled out by all of these spearmen in formation. Obviously the 4th Legion, pretty much a universal sight when you play as or against Khazad-dûm, because they're just so efficient and so good at what they do, and the fact that they can act as infantry as well because of how good they are means you'll often see them. They also help to somewhat make up for Khazad-dûm's lack of cavalry options for the most part by acting as a good zoning out tool for cavalry. Defeat is a distinct possibility. These Barret Whites just are not interested in laying down their arms and dying, but while this is going on, we can obviously see that the engagement pretty much entirely happened here. There was that initial one where the Khazad-dûm cavalry came over here to try and shut down the Snaga archers, and they were momentarily successful, but ultimately Angmar were able to keep their Snaga archers, and they were able to keep doing some damage throughout the fight, which was good for them, but in the end maybe another unit of Snaga archers would have helped, just to help deal some damage to those Merc crossbows, because it could be that the Merc crossbows getting that chip damage across the course of the fight, which is a little bit more difficult to keep track of, was what ultimately ensured the Dwarven victory here, which would be a good example of them actually working. Barret White certainly did their job as well, hence why this battle has gone on for essentially 3,000 frames longer than it would have. Slowly but surely these Barret Whites are going to be cut down, and we are now at the end of the fight, and well done to Starling. That's another victory for him. This time, rather than defeating the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, he has won with them. Balin may be dead, but his sacrifice will not be forgotten, I'm sure. So, to sum up, yeah, I would say that the sentries of Khazad-dûm in the late game particularly were probably the key here for Khazad-dûm. The Khazad-dûm Reclaimers obviously doing damage throughout the fight, but they were also a real target for Angmar to try and shut down for good reason, because of how much damage they can do. The Khazad-dûm cavalry as well, it might not be the flashiest, but it certainly got the job done here. And obviously you can see here the dwarves obviously getting more kills. 2,200 men deployed. That's not a huge amount less than the orcs. But let's have a look at what did the damage for Angmar. Obviously the Witchers getting 424 kills. That's not surprising. They did huge damage. Yeah, I mean, without the Witchers, Angmar probably would have been in substantially more trouble than they otherwise were. But having a look throughout, you can see the Trolls not getting a huge amount of kills, but then they were fighting off against Khazad-dûm Reclaimers in melee, who are capable of standing their ground. The Snagastalkers obviously getting very low amounts of kills. They were used as a sort of shield for the most part. The Hammer Guard getting a good amount of kills, but eventually they couldn't carry on. And then the Witch-Arm Inquisitors also doing fairly well. One unit of Halberds did okay, and that was probably the one that was supported with all of the elite units. The rest of them obviously significantly worse. The Black Watch Legion obviously pushed their way through, but then started to fall away. Yeah, the Witchers used to good effect. The Dwarves winning, however, managing to weather that storm. It was a good fight. It was close, but towards the end, obviously, the Dwarven resilience managed to pull through. And while the Barrow Wights were able to stand their ground for a long time, if they don't have a lot of support to do the damage for them, you're always going to be struggling a little bit. But still, very, very good. I'm sure people will be happy to see that the Orcs trying to push through the lines this time didn't quite work out in their favour. Well played to both players, and thank you very much to Kuro for sending me this replay. Next, I will probably be showing a scenario. I think I have 2 scenarios that I can currently show, which I've got. One of those 2 will be up next, and then obviously we will carry on the cycle from there. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.